Hello everyone, welcome back to Hightower Stitching. This is Stephanie with today's video, which is 188. It's called Goodbye Orphan Fabric and Hello Colorful Quilt. And it's going to have fabric bands and triangle squares, just those two different things in our quilt for today. This quilt comes from The Love of Quilting, July-August 2020, page 56. And I did find, if you wanted to order the magazine, a back order number, and it's on the bottom of this sheet. That said, let's get started. If you've ever seen the sign that says, "Every quilt has a story," it's really true. Think about the quilts that you have. Think about who gave them to you, how you decided to make them, what you decided about them. And I'm going to tell you how this one started, is that I found this quilt in that magazine we were talking about, Love of Quilting. And then I thought, that's a lot of cutting to do to make those bands and to be so careful with them. And I said, what would be a fun way to do it to get started and see if I even liked it? And so I said, oh my gosh, there is my Orphan fabric. I have this wine box that was given to me, and that's where I would put strips from projects that I was working on. Well, it was a lot higher than this when I started. And I thought, I'll probably even be able to go into another box where I have some scraps and use that. Well, guess what? What you're looking at is still what's left over in my box there. Because what I did, I only used 13-inch strips, so that eliminated a lot. But it gave me a great opportunity to clean this box up again. And so that's how it all started, a pretty quilt and a box of fabric. And this is where I am so far. The goal was to make 64 8.5-inch squares that are put together, and with 3 borders added, which will be in the description, you'll end up with an 80 by 80-inch quilt. So you can adjust it by how much of the border that you add to it, how big you want it. But I want to draw your attention to the different greens and see how the greens are running. And when I started out, I used a green I had, and then I had to run to the fabric shop because I decided I like that green all the way through there. The one in the book does a blue for that part, and it's really nice because green ties things together and blue ties things together. And when you take 4 of the squares and you lay them a certain way, you end up with these on point squares in there. And the other thing that you have is a white background. And I just chose something that I had because I was going to use it up. It had a lot of the backing. But you can also take a fabric with a very fine print in it and use something else there for to pull your quilt together. So today, where we're going, there's only 2 parts. We're going to look at the green and white part, and then we're going to look at the part that's got the bands that are sewn on there when you get them cut. So here we go. Here's a sample of an 8.5-inch block. And like I was talking about, we're going to end up with a white and green section that's going to be added to a section that's got your bands sewed together so that you can see what this looks like. And for the quilt that I'm worked on, it's 64 of those blocks. So there we've looked at the sample of where we're going and looked at a sample for the block. Now what I want to do is let's look at the patches that you're going to need. And I know I kept saying, here we go, but I was really ready to do this morning because I had such a good time. All right, when you pick your color that's going to flow through your quilt, if you'll look, one of the things that I used was this, a blue-green. This is a 9 1/4-inch square, okay? And I had different variations of it. just because I was short material and added to it. Okay, so that's one thing. Next thing that you're going to want is that background color that you were going to work with. And it can be just a solid like this, or you can get some fabric that's got the little print in it like we were talking about. But here again, this is going to be 9 1/4 inch square. And the only difference with this one is, and we've done this before on a lot of the quilts we've seen, I hope you can see that, I have taken and drawn a diagonal from one corner to the other and then come out 1/4 of an inch on each side. And sometimes I tell you to go right on the line, sometimes I go in the line. Well, for this one I sort of went inside the line, but it's really close when we get ready to cut the square down. And so where are we going to start? Is we're going to start with picking up one of each of those, and we're going to put those, the face up for your print, and then lay the piece that you marked down. Now, the inside is your cutting line, so you don't need to do anything with that. The outside line is the one you're going to stitch. Now, I chose black so you could see it. Most of the time I used white all the way through mine, or an off-white. And you would take and do both sides. This is really fun because you can do a lot of these with that machine chain stitching and run down one side, then turn them around. But I didn't run like 64. I just went ahead and did like a section of 10, just something that was manageable. And then I'd turn them around and run it down the other side. Then I was ready for the next part. And so I called this was A1 because you're going to do that sew and cut with that one. After you have it, and you're going to take and cut, and you can use your rotary cutter, I did that, or just your scissor, depending where you are when you're working on this. So I've got that now stitched and cut. Now what we're going to do is get ready to cut it again. And this is where you're going to see those triangles in the square. Now this needs to be pressed, and for the minute I'm just going to finger press it. I have the iron sitting right there and it's easy to do, but I'm going to take that and I'm going to take my ruler, get everything all situated here. There it goes. And now I'm going to cut from corner to corner on that diagonal. Line it up nice so it's nice, but when you're looking from point to point, it's easy, and you cut. And as we go through it, and as we get to the end, you're going to see that these are going to be called two different things. But you're going to be making everything that you need now. It's just going to be a matter of putting things together and turning them in the right direction. So I did, that was half of it. Then I would take the other half, same thing. I'd fold it back, press it, and do it. And I would have 4 of these already. And that would be 4, that would make 4 of your blocks as we go. So that's kind of neat. And once you get those done and you've got those pieces, that's the end of that. The biggest thing there is you're cutting out, and then you're stitching down that center line and then doing 2 cuts, the first cut and the second cut. Okay, the next thing we want to look at are we're going to look at the patches and for the bands. Now, remember, mine was coming out of my Orphan box. So I said, I'm going to use whatever I've got because I want to see how empty I can get that box. I actually thought the box would be empty when I got finished, but you could tell that it wasn't. So what I do is you're going to use 2-inch strip, a 2-inch wide. And if you're going to make it with just Orphan fabrics or smaller pieces, a 13-inch band will make one of your blocks, will be able to finish your block. So right here, I would take, and I picked out 4 things, and I thought of light and dark, because you're going to, and you can arrange those in different ways. And if you have 2 sets of the same thing, that's really neat. And sometimes, like on that quilt, I had it like maybe twice. But then I'd take and put a pin in it, and I'd go on to my next stack. And there again, when I had like 10 or 12 stacks, then I'd just take and set them down, and I'd be ready to go to my sewing machine. And it really got to be fun. When I got to the sewing machine, I would take my first set of 4. And this worked so well. I went and I stitched carefully down 1/4 of an inch. And you know, you can either press it to the side or you can open it. I had good luck with opening this and not distorting my bands, because when I turn them over, you can see how they're laying. I did each pair. Once I got a pair done, then I decided, well, do I want it like that? Do I want a light outside and a dark? And then you play with it, and you may have had an idea the way you wanted to do it, and you change it now. But then you're going to lay those together, and you might see where that machine chain stitching comes in again. So you would take and run your stitches down there 1/4 of an inch, and then press it, and either press it to the side or press it open, and that's what I did. And once I got that ready, then I took and measured it. And I found out that this should be, that band, when you every place along there, if you check it in 3 places, that about 6 1/4 was a great width that they made. And that sort of help you, because once you figure out that you're on the right track, and if you're using some pretty stable material, you don't have to measure every single one. Okay? All right. So now we've got a band with our 4 colors on it, and it's all ready to go. We had the triangle that we did at the beginning, and we ended up with our 2 colors. See, this is really fun because it just goes so well together. I'm going to take and pin that triangle on. All right. And then you can see my black stitching. Then I come down here and I put in 1/4 of an inch all the way across. All right. So there's might be some learning there. One of the things that they call for, and I'm going to show it to you in a minute. I won't jump ahead right now. So I've got this. I'm going to take and I'm going to open it, and I'm going to press it. You can either press it open, which is what I tended to do again, or press it the way the fabric wants to lay. And you'll have something that looks like a little sailing ship of a sort. And then this is where I learned a lot. Here's where you're going to finish your block. You're going to lay this on here. All right. Then find a ruler that you have. And I had this square ruler. And what you need is one that has a line that goes on the 45. And it's hard to see, but trust me, from that corner to that corner, there is a line drawn on this one. And that's going to be what I use. All right. So I'm going to take and move that up a little bit so I got a little more room. All right. The first thing I looked at was that line that we were just talking about that goes through there. And I set my ruler on that line. But don't start cutting yet, because I want you to check something. This block's supposed to be 8.5 inches when you get done. If I leave this right where it is right now, when I look down at this side, it says I've got 9 inches. When I look down at this side, it's got 9 inches. That's going to throw us off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that line right there, and I'm going to slowly slide it towards me until on each side I'm looking at 8.5 over here and 8.5 over here. But always go back and check your line, because the more you're careful with this part, the better your blocks are going to fit together. Okay, now I think I've got it. I've got a pretty straight line going up. I'm still on 8.5, and I'm still on 8.5. I'm going to take this, see if I can get around the camera, and I'm going to cut that off. Now you can see I had waste, but it didn't matter because it was Orphan blocks. All right, then I want to cut off the other side carefully. I got it. That is neat. But now you can see, because we were very careful and we pull this away, there is the square that we were looking for, just like we had with our sample. Here was that other sample. And now these, the orientation, if you look at it, is different for the green. The green's towards the right, and on this one, the green's towards the left. And that's what's funny when you first start laying the quilt out on the floor or on your wall. If you have a wall to work on, you're going to find out that watching where the greens go, is going to help you to make your big triangles, those big diamonds, rather, that we were working on. So I want to do that one more time, because once you've got that, now this should look familiar to you. And you say, oh yeah, there's another one of those pairs. There's where she's stitched on the line. There's her bands. And even from here, you can tell that looks pretty much like 6 1/4. So now, what did we do? Well, we pressed it first. We're going to pretend like we pressed it. Pretending, okay. Then we're going to take a ruler that's got that 45 line in it. We're going to take and start by setting it up, the line with the line on the piece of material that you have. All right. And then we think we've got it. I look over there and I go, oh, I got 8 3/4 and 8 3/4. That's not going to work. So I'm slowly going to slide it towards me. And I have to get this over here a little bit. And again, and then every once in a while stop and check. This side I've got 8 1/2. This side now I've got 8 1/4. Well, then that means that either my line's gotten off, but all I have to do is slide it back to 8 1/2. And then just watch my line, and you keep playing with it, and you're going to get really good at it. And that's all it is. It's just being very careful. Then once you get that, you're going to take and cut off both sides. And see, I had waste with this, but I thought, well, I'm doing something good with what I have, and then cut off the other one. And so that was just part of the process for this. All right. So let's say that you have the width of a piece of material, the 42 inches across. So I thought, well, I'm going to do one of those for you, even though I didn't do it. And I actually had fun picking out what I was going to put together. So here I have 4 different colors put together. I did 2 inches. This is a full 42-inch piece of fabric going all the way down. This is the way that they do it in the magazine. Then, to help you, this is kind of neat. And once you get those 4 put together, you're going to be able to get 4 blocks out of this now with a piece left on the end. One of the pieces that I researched on doing bands, it said 21 inches or 22 inches is a good length for a band that you're working on. And so when I did this one, if you look at it, well, then 21 came out right here. So if you had 21 inches, you could work 2 easily. You wouldn't get this third one, but you'd get that one. So let's go back to setting these up, though. So you can put this end towards the close to the end, but you don't have to, because you know there's some left on the other end. Leave about 1 inch, approximately 1 inch of room. Here's going to be your first one. Now, the bottom has the green to the left and the green to the left. And then if you look at the other part, you're going to turn one this way and lay it on there. You're going to turn one up. Now, just make sure that your green, there again, is still going to the left, and it's up there. And every time they go towards the left. And then on this one, you're going to be able to cut after you stitch each one of them down. Stitch all of them down that you've got on there. Then come back and do your slice between the middle of it. Now, it's going to look different than the one that we were doing, but it's going to work on the same idea. So let's take, and I'm going to do a whack on this and see. Well, let's see, I gotta have one that's stitched, so that'll be this one right here. So I'm gonna cut up through here, and I'm gonna cut up through here, and it's not gonna be stitched. The bands are stitched. All right, and let's see how it would look if that was stitched through there. I'm gonna pin it. Some more of my pretend stitching. And I think this is going to be one of those that I'm going to do again, and I'm going to pick my fabric, because you could see you'd have 4 colors, 4 different blocks that would be the same. So now how this will be different is I'm going to fold it that way. And see, I left some extra out there. I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm going to set it, and I'm going to set it on the line, and I'm going to look for my 8.5 and my 8.5, and I go back, make sure my line's still looking good. And then now all you have to trim is that outside piece right there. And maybe, yeah, that came out just right up at the top. And then just remember, you still have a 1/4 of an inch up there. So about 1 inch between is a good distance to do. And that brings us down to putting 4 and 5 together, which we just did. And when we get the squares put together and we get the bands put together and put them together, we have made a really nice block. And one of the things, there are 3 different borders. I believe there's a narrow 2-inch, and then there's maybe a 2-inch on the outside. But in the middle, and I'm telling you this while you're cutting your fabric, let's say, because one of the borders has a 2.5 by 3.5 block, and it uses the fabrics that you had, and just pick them up at random, and you sew those together to make your border, your second border that goes in through there. So as you're looking at your fabrics and you're cutting them, then you can cut those as you go if you have some material left from the colors you're using. Let's go back and look at the quilt 1 short second. So now we're back in with the quilt. And I know that was quick, but there's just two things that you have to take care of. That is making your green and white part, and then the other part is your bands. And that is really the first time I've ever really had fun doing the bands, because 2 inches is a good size and just really laid well. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. I hope you enjoyed this one today, and if you have a bunch of orphan fabrics, you can give them a new home. And you know what was funny was, it's not going to matter how I stitch this one. I'm not going to have to put great thought into it. I can just do squares or curlies or whatever I want to do, because this is really going to be a used quilt. If I've forgotten anything or there's something you need to know, I will have written it in the description. Please subscribe. Let me know you've been here, and have a great day. Thank you.